Hello there and welcome back to the Soy Pig Job Edition, where we have a look at your toolkit, how to get your jobstone, your job gauge, and how it all works. Now this time we're going to be having a look into the Dark Knight, the first new tank class added to the game with the Heavensward expansion, using their greatsword and their dark side to vanquish the foes. So all of the expansion jobs work differently to the starter classes because none of them start at level 1. They all start at different levels based on what expansion they're from. Heavensward jobs start at level 30, Stormbloods are level 50, Shadowbringers level 60, and lastly Endwalkers, those start at level 70. So when you unlock the job, you're kind of thrown in at the deep end because you suddenly have a whole bunch of skills and abilities instantly at your disposal. So it can be a bit daunting to start off with, trying to figure out what everything does and how everything fits together. So come join me and Rin as we dive into the Dark Knight. Are you ready to channel your dark side, Rin? Calm down, you're looking evil. You're looking evil. Right? People say Lalas are evil anyway at the best of times. So, you nice and calm? Let's head out. Right guys, so in order to unlock the Dark Knight job, you will need the following. You'll need to own the Heavensward expansion, and you will need a combat job at level 50 or higher to take the quest. However, the Heavensward jobs have the extra requirement of you needing to have reached Foundation, which is the starter city for the Heavensward content itself. So you'll need to have completed all of the base game story content. So that's all of A Realm Reborn and all the patch content which led up to patch 3.0, which is where Heavensward starts. That being said, you will probably be higher than level 50 by the time you get to Foundation, just the way main story quest works and the amount of experience points you get, because there's a lot of content to get through. So once that's done, you will come here to pick up this quest. Now the NPC isn't here for me since I've unlocked it already, but finish that quest and you'll be the proud owner of the Dark Knight Jobstone. Your first sword and 2 pieces of level 30 tank gear, which will drop straight into your armory chest. Now, to change the Dark Knight job, you will be going into the character menu down here, and unlike the start classes, you'll be equipping the Claymore weapon, and the Jobstone will equip along with it, as the expansion jobs work differently. Now, for speed, I would suggest selecting the recommended gear button and setting up a gear set while you're in here. If you don't know how to do that, check the card popping up right now on the screen to my short guide on it. But if you're all sorted, congratulations, you are now an official Dark Knight with a full but messed up hotbar. Now, personally, I would remove everything from the hotbar and start fresh, because they do tend to place stuff randomly on your bar as it throws it all at you. So to do that quickly, you can use the following macro, which will remove everything from that hotbar. So make sure that you pick the right one. Alright, so now comes the fun bit. We're going to have a look at your start toolkit at level 30, what you've got to work with as soon as you unlock the job. Then we're going to have a look at how it all fits together, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the toolkits, the level 30 to 51 and the level 50 to 61. Nice and cool stuff. Naturally, time codes are available for you should you want to skip ahead. Right guys, so jumping straight into your toolkit. At level 1, you have Hard Slash. Now, Hard Slash will deliver an attack with a potency of 150, and it is the first part of your melee combo. Nice and straightforward. Now, next up, you get Siphon Strike. Now, Siphon Strike is the second part of your melee combo, and it will deliver an attack with a potency of 100. It will combo off of hard slash, and if you do the full combo, boost that potency up to 240. And it has a combo bonus of restoring MP whenever it's used in that combo. And next up, you will get your first AoE, which is called Unleash. Now, Unleash will deal unaspected damage with a potency of 120 to all of your nearby enemies. Really cool move, actually, very cool move. Now, next up, you have Grit. Now, Grit's fairly straightforward. It is Dark Knight's tank stance ability. If you want to be actively tanking, make sure you have Grit turned on. Nice and straightforward. Now, next up, you will get Unmend. Now, Unmend is your ranged attack for pulling enemies from a distance. It will deal unexpected damage with a potency of 150 and has the additional effect of increased enmity. So if you want to pull enemies from range, hit them with an Unmend and it'll get their attention and they'll come towards you. And next up, you have Soul Eater, which is the third part of your melee combo. Now, that will deliver an attack with a potency of 100. That one will combo off of Siphon Strike, so your full combo will be hard slash, Siphon Strike, Soul Eater. And if you do it in the full combo, it will boost that potency up to 320. Now, Soul Eater has a combo bonus as well. Unlike Siphon Strike, where it restores MP, your comboed Soul Eater will restore some health points to you. So it's kind of like a mini regen. And that cure potency is 300. Now, next up, for doing your level 30 job quest, you will get Flood of Darkness. Now, Flood of Darkness is an attack which will deal unexpected damage with a potency of 130 to all enemies in a straight line before you. It does come at a hefty cost of 3000 MP. However, it is fairly easy to get those magic points back. Now, this move has the additional effect of granting you a buff called Dark Side, which will increase your damage dealt by 10%, and that buff will last for 30 seconds. Now, if you use Flood of Darkness again before your initial buff runs out, it will extend the buff by 30 seconds up to a maximum of 60 seconds. Now, you want to be keeping this Dark Side buff up as much as possible because an extra 10% damage adds up over the course of a fight to quite a hefty chunk. And that is your starter kit for Dark Knight. So now we've caught up with the starter toolkit for Dark Knight. Raw skill wise, they all have their uses, but my tank essentials would be putting in Rampart, Low Blow and Provoke, and then add in Reprisal and Arm's Length when you can. Now, Reprisal is an AoE debuff which reduces the damage dealt by all enemies hit by it by 10% for 10 seconds. You can use that every 60 seconds. Super handy for large pulls and bosses alike. Pretty much use it whenever it's available. And lastly, Arm's Length, which is both a buff and a debuff, creating a barrier around you for 6 seconds, preventing most knockback and drawing effects, which is useful, but it also has the additional effect of adding a 20% slow debuff to any enemy that hits you in that 5-second window. Now, when people read slow, they usually think of movement speed and just completely disregard this skill. However, in FF14, slow doesn't mean movement speed, it actually means attack speed. So as the enemies attack you, their attack speed will be slowed for 15 seconds, meaning you will take less damage. In my opinion, massively underrated raw skill, and is best used either as you're pulling a large group of mobs into position, when your healer can't always heal you while you're on the run, or just after you've got the mob into position, depending on the dungeon you're in. Boss wise, not really worth using it on them for the slow debuff, as they tend to be resistant to it. So it is best to save it for any push-pull moves that certain bosses have. Now, you'll learn which bosses have a push, pull, move as you play in the game. It's fairly straightforward to work it out. It's fairly easy. Right guys, so your basic starter rotation, fairly straightforward. First things first, make sure you have grit turned on, which is your tank stance for Dark Knight. Then as you run up, you can lead off with a unmend, which is your ranged attack to get their attention. Straight into a flood of darkness to get your damage buff on the go. Then hit them with a couple of unleashes just to get a good foothold on them. And straight into your Soul Eater combos. So that would be Hard Slash, Siphon Strike, and then Soul Eater. And whenever you have a spare 3000 MP, just hit them with another Flood of Darkness and repeat your single target rotation. Using your defensive cooldowns as and when you need to. Fairly straightforward. Okay, so your AoE rotation is even more basic in this one. You'd still be leading in as you run up with a unmend, Flood of Darkness, straight into Unleash spam to hit as many enemies as possible. Keep good hold of them. And weave in a couple of Floods of Darkness. And when you're running low on MP, hit an enemy with one of your Soul Eater combos to generate a few magic points back. Straight into another Flood of Darkness and back into Unleash spam. And just repeat that till everyone's dead. And like the single target, use your defensive cooldowns as and when you need to. So, with that being so simple, I figured I would add in some general tanking tips, starting with number 1, your tank stance. Now this one's straightforward. At the start of a dungeon, make sure you have your tank stance turned on, as it will sometimes turn itself off if you get synced below your current level. Now for Dark Knights, that is called Grit. Nice and straightforward. Just make sure you have it turned on. Number 2, check out your group. Now similar to healers, while you're waiting to start, it is worth having a quick look at your party's gear and makeup, because that can affect how much you can get away with pulling. Now if your healer is under geared, for example, they'll generally have weaker heals and won't be able to keep up with the amount of damage that you'll be taking. So you'll need to be prepared to adjust for that. Likewise with the DPS, the melee jobs for example don't start getting their AoE skills until mid to late 30s, so early on a larger pull may take longer for them to kill, adding more strain on the group as a whole as well. Another thing it's worth keeping an eye on is your healer's MP, especially just after a fight, because that can affect the size of your next pull. Generally, if they're around about the 5,000 mark, then you should be okay with a larger one. If not, then it's sometimes worth holding back a little bit while it recovers. Now, next up, number 3, speak up. Now don't be afraid to tell the group that you are new to tanking or a bit unsure. 99% of the time, the rest of your group will offer advice and be pretty chill with any mistakes you make, so don't be afraid to speak up. Number 4, remember your ABCs. Now, try to use ABC positioning as much as you can. If you don't know what I mean, or you missed my other tank videos, I will do a quick recap now. Now, ABC positioning is where you try to keep the mob or boss in between you and the rest of the group. So you would be in position A, the enemy is in position B, and the rest of your group is in position C, which keeps most of the damage facing away from your group. Now that being said, it's not always possible, because other party members can and probably do position themselves in some less than ideal spots, but try to do it as much as you can. Next up, number 5, push yourself. Now, try and pull as many enemies as you feel comfortable with, but also don't be afraid to push it a little bit, because with practice you can do some very large pulls in most of the dungeons and survive quite well. If you don't survive, however, don't worry, failure is okay as long as you learn from it. Just dust yourself off, try again, and adjust accordingly. And lastly, number 6, be adaptable. Now, sometimes things just don't go smoothly, be it a melee DPS that stands in front of the boss with you and ends up getting smacked in the face and taking massive damage, if they even survive it, or enemies not going where you want them to go. Just be prepared to adapt to random stuff and you'll generally be fine. Right guys, so now I've had a look at the basic toolkit and the starter rotation. Before we jump into the new toolkits, I do have to say that unlike the other jobs in the game, the Heavensward jobs, the bulk of their skills come as quest rewards for doing the job quests themselves. So if you don't do your job quests, you will not have access to most of your toolkit up to level 60. So please be sure to keep on top of them just so you have access to these skills. So that being said, let's just jump straight into the level 30 to 50 toolkit. Starting off with Blood Weapon at level 35. Now, Blood Weapon is an ability with a recast time of 60 seconds, so you can use it every 60 seconds. It will grant you a 10-second buff, which will restore MP upon landing weapon skills or spells. Really handy for getting your MP back after using Flood of Darkness. So whenever it's available, keep reapplying Blood Weapon, so you constantly generate an MP, and the more MP you have, the more you can use Flood of Darkness and some of your other MP related skills further down the line. Nice and straightforward. And next up, level 38, you will get Shadow Wall. Now, Shadow Wall is Dark Knight's first native defensive cooldown. It will reduce your damage taken by 30% and it will last for 15 seconds. Now you can recast that every 2 minutes, so use it wisely. Now next up, level 40, you will get Edge of Darkness. Now Edge of Darkness works pretty much the exact same way as Flood of Darkness, with the exception of Edge is a single target version and it has a higher potency of 300, whereas Flood of Darkness only has a potency of 130. So in single target situations, use Edge of Darkness instead of Flood of Darkness. Now next up, level 45, you will get Dark Mind. Now, Dark Mind is another defensive cooldown, and it will reduce your magic vulnerability by 20%, and that lasts for 10 seconds. And you can recast that every 60 seconds. Now, with Dark Mind, it is different from all the other defensive cooldowns because it deals specifically with magic damage. So you won't be using it as a general defensive cooldown. You'll be using Dark Mind for magic type enemies. So the easiest way to tell if it's a magical attack, if it looks magical, it's generally a magical attack. But it's definitely something that you will learn the more you in fights with Dark Knight. You'll be able to tell which ones are magic attacks and which ones are physical. And lastly, level 50, you will get Living Dead. Now, Living Dead is Dark Knight's invulnerability move. Now when you use Living Dead, it will grant you the status of Living Dead. Now while you're under that status, if your health points are reduced to 0, instead of dying, your stats will change to Walking Dead. Now while you're under the effect of Walking Dead, most attacks will not lower your health points below 1. However, if 100% of your HP is not restored in the 10 seconds that the Walking Dead buff lasts, you will in fact die. So it is very healer dependent. It is always worthwhile letting your healer know that you are using Living Dead so that they can get you back up to full health as quickly as possible. Otherwise it can cause problems. And that is your level 30 to 50 toolkit. Right guys, so your level 50 rotation doesn't really change that much at all. you'll probably notice if you played other tanks that from 30 to 50 you tend to not get that many more offensive moves. Most of them are on the defensive side. The only real difference are use blood weapon on cooldown just to regenerate as much MP back as possible. You can get more uses of Edge of Darkness and Flood of Darkness. In single target situations, use Edge of Darkness instead of Flood. AoEs, use Flood. Fairly straightforward. You can use all your other defensive cooldowns as and when you need them. And like the other tanks' immunity moves, they aren't just there for oh shit moments, although they do help for that. Use Living Dead when you feel it is necessary. Just the only difference, or the main difference, is you will need to communicate to your healer that you have used the skill. So I'm going to throw up a macro right now, which is an announcement macro, which will put a message into chat to let your healer know that you have used Living Dead. Like I said, communication is key with this one. So that being said, let's jump into the 50 to 60 toolkit. Right guys, so your level 50 to 60 toolkit is quite short. It's only 4 moves. However, unlike your 30 to 50, these are mostly on the offensive side. Starting with Salted Earth at level 52. Now, Salted Earth will create an area of effect around you, which will deal unexpected damage with a potency of 50 to any enemies who are standing in that circle. Now, this is best used whenever it's available and you have a group of enemies nearby you. All that extra damage all adds up. Now, next up, level 54, you will get Plunge. Now, Plunge is a super straightforward one. It is Dark Knight's gap closer move. Really handy for getting back to a boss after you've dodged an AoE, or jumping to another target that you need to attack quite quickly. In general, it's a mobility move. Naturally, you cannot use it while you are under the bound status, much like all the other ones. Now, next up, level 56, you will get Abyssal Drain. Now, Abyssal Drain is an AoE move which will deal unexpected damage with a potency of 150 to your target and all enemies nearby it. Now, it has 2 additional effects. It will restore your own health points for every enemy that it hits with a cure potency of 200, and it also restores a chunk of MP. Now, Abyssal Drain is more handy when you are fighting more than one enemy. Ideally, the more enemies that are hit by it, the more health points you'll get back. And you can use that every 60 seconds. And it shares a recast timer with your level 60 ability called Carve and Spit. Now, Carve and Spit will deliver a 3-fold attack with a potency of 510, so it hits quite hard. And it has the additional effect of restoring a chunk of MP every time you use it. And you can recast that every 60 seconds. Both pretty cool abilities. And that is your level 50 to 60 toolkit. Now, onto your level 60 rotation. Right guys, so your level 60 rotation doesn't change at all realistically. You're still going to be doing all the same stuff that you've been doing up to now. Only additions are add in a Salted Earth whenever it's available. Keep that going around you so that any enemies get that extra damage. Use Plunge if and when you need to move around the battlefield a little bit quicker. And then lastly, if you're in an AoE situation, hit them with an Abyssal Drain for the AoE damage and that nice little self-heal. Again, more enemies you have, the more you'll be healed. So use that one wisely. If you're in a single target environment, use Carve and Spit instead, just for that extra MP. Still keep your dark side buff up as much as possible for the extra damage, and still use your defensive cooldowns as and when you need them. Now, you've noticed over the course of this video, and if you've seen the other tanking videos I've done, that the tank toolkits tend to be on the more streamlined side. And that's mainly so that you have an easier time of it. You don't have to worry about your toolkit necessarily. Once you've learned it, you don't have to keep on relearning your job. you can then spend your time more focused on mob management and positioning and keeping an eye on attack moves and everything like that. So you don't have to worry about your toolkit. You can focus more on actually the fight itself, which is a cool way of doing it. It does make tanking more accessible to more people, which I find incredibly cool. Right guys, so this has been our first look into the Dark Knight. Now hopefully we've dispelled some of the mysteries of how everything works and everything fits together. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask in the comment section on Twitter or in game if you so desire. Now Rin, thank you again for your help. It is always appreciated. You're too cool, you Rin. You're too cool. Now I'm not sure what's coming next, as the poll I put up ended up being quite balanced overall, with Dark Knight being the winner with 32%, which is why we're here. Now, Gunbreaker, Astrologian and Samurai all ended up at 18%, and Machinist / Dancer are bringing up the rear at 14%. So, if you have any suggestions, do let me know down below. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, let me know by hitting that like button. If you're new here, feel free to come hang out, come check out some other stuff I've got going on. We would love to have you here. Subscribe so you can come back faster. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you again for all the support. It's always appreciated. I love you all from the bottom of my heart. And you all know what's coming. Please like, share, comment, subscribe and all that jazz. And as always, we shall see you on the flip side. Bye bye.